Welcome to Stand Up for Doctors. I'm your host, Kim Downey. Thank you very much for joining us. I'd like to welcome Dr. Joe Sherman. Thank you for joining us today, Joe.
Thanks for having me, Kim. I really appreciate you having me.
Well, I'm really excited for our conversation here. So, to briefly introduce you, Joe is a pediatrician, a master certified physician development coach, keynote speaker, and medical team retreat facilitator, trained with the Center for Courage and Renewal. And Joe believes that all helping professionals can thrive in their work rather than just survive. And I absolutely love that.
Thanks.
So I usually share how I connected with my guests. So you and I way back on April 2nd, and that's right when I found LinkedIn. Actually, I mean to be active on LinkedIn. And I had sent you a message and I said, "Hi, Dr. Sherman. I see that we share some connections. I'm beginning to work with my local healthcare system to address physician well-being. I hadn't heard of the Center for Courage and Renewal. It looks like a wonderful resource. I'll have to explore it further." And you responded that you found Parker Palmer's books and the center to be a great support and resource when you had experienced burnout yourself. And then over time, some of our other communications, you offer great feedback about CTI, the Coactive Training Institute. And I took your suggestion and I ended up participating in a 3-day fundamentals course. And that was awesome. So I really appreciated your input on that.
Yeah.
And I listened to your excellent podcast with Sarah Smith.
Yep. Yeah.
And then I asked you about Physicians Anonymous, and you shared a couple additional resources. As I told you, I was compiling a list of free and confidential resources for physicians. And then what really surprised me, so you sent me a message and you said, "Hi, Kim, congratulations on your new podcast. Please add me to the list of wannabe guests. Be well, Joe." And I was just about to send you a message asking you
Oh,
to be on it.
wow. That's
So
great.
I thought that was crazy, like literally. So I don't know if I had just logged on to LinkedIn or if I was doing stuff and I was just about to send it. When that message popped up from you, I'm like, this is crazy. So that's why I got right back to it. I'm like, absolutely. I
Well,
wanted you as a guest.
well, Kim, I really appreciate that. And I have to say that I appreciate you fighting the fight for physicians. And I know you're a physical therapist, and I know that you're very dedicated to your profession and everything you do. But I was just talking to someone yesterday who is another coach, and he also works as an advisor, as a patient advisor to a
Mm,
health system.
mm,
And I said, it won't be until the patients themselves
mhm,
revolt
mhm,
and start to say, we are not getting the health care that we need,
mhm,
that the plight of physicians and other healthcare providers and all health professionals will be addressed, and that
mhm,
our well-being and our very survival and resilience in our jobs is going to be supported. So
mhm.
I applaud you and thank you so much for your efforts.
Well, thank you. And I think you are exactly right. It's going to be patience. A lot of, as Dr. Todd On would say, we need positive disruptors, right? Just
Exactly,
to change the
exactly.
system here. And and two, if any of these system changes are going to happen, like, on national or government levels, if only the 1 million doctors show up in the voting booths, we're in trouble, right? You need a lot more people than that. So we are right. We're all in this together. So, yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Hmm.
And so today we're going to be primarily discussing your work with Physicians Anonymous and answering
Sure.
questions our physician audience might have about it. And before we dive in specifically to that, what would you most like our audience to know about you?
Well, I am at heart, I'm a pediatrician. I'm a general pediatrician. I love working with families in trying to understand the health and well-being of their kids and raising their kids. And I love working in the community and with communities in a holistic fashion, in teams and medical teams, understanding that I have certain gifts and talents, but I fall short in a lot of areas and I need help all the time. And you know how they say it takes a village to raise a child.
Mm,
And I believe that pediatricians, as well as other primary care doctors who are caring for children, they need a village to help them support
mhm,
families in raising kids. And for me, I discovered that the reason I went into pediatrics was about relationships,
mm,
was about interacting with people, about making connections at a deep level.
mhm,
And whenever I saw that present and felt that present in my practice, I thrived.
mhm,
And whenever it was absent and it was all about productivity and getting the work done and making you sure that you have all the administrative tasks completed, then I just sunk. And
mhm,
so for me, that led me to a downfall, really. It led me to kind of bouncing around from job to job, with some being just amazing experiences and others really being my downfall. And so I had to really struggle to discover who I am underneath this armor that we put on as physicians. And that began my journey to discovering who I am authentically and who I want to be in the world. And as it turned out, I discovered the exact types of places that where I could thrive as a provider and a physician, as well as those places where I would sink. And I
mhm.
want to help other physicians, other health professionals to discover that same thing, that same energy, that same passion for what they really want to be doing, and
Mhm.
not fitting into some box that someone else has created for us.
I love that. That is so important. So thank you for having that as your mission, because you're doing great work and it's really crucial work. And we share a love of children. You know, most of my work was pediatrics. My last 7 years, I was at a local elementary school. So I too loved the relationships, you know, with the children.
Yeah, kids are great.
And
You know, I have a few kids myself.
okay.
I always say that I was a pediatrician for 10 years before I had my first child. And before I had my first child, I was just a brilliant pediatrician. And from
Yeah.
that day on, I think I know less and less and less about kids as my kids grow older.
Yeah, exactly. I think I was practicing about 7 years before our son was born, so I hear you.
Yeah,
That's funny. You become humble, right?
absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh, that's great. Thanks. So getting into Physicians Anonymous, there is
Yeah.
a website, physiciansanonymous.org, and
Mm,
it's a very good, very easy to navigate website. So a quick summary when I checked it out myself is you can click on a link for individuals, and then if you click on individuals, there's either anonymous meetings or one-to-one coaching, and even there's an option to stay anonymous. You can click on organizations if you wanted any consulting for your organization surrounding burnout and these issues. And then there's a link you can click on that says coaches, and that's where you can see bios, right? And reach out to specific coaches. So when I wanted to recommend Physicians Anonymous, I wanted to check some of these coaches out. So I've spoken personally with at least a half dozen,
oh,
and there's
great.
both physician and non-physician coaches on there, and I've spoken with both. And then there's a blog, right, with some really good blog
Yes.
posts on there as well. So
Yes.
that's in a nutshell. If you go to the website, like I said, it's easy to navigate. So I'm wondering if you could tell us what you most want our audience to know about Anonymous, and walk us through, like, if a physician who's listening decides to check it out, like, what exactly is the process? You know, speak to both like the anonymous meetings and the one-on-one coaching.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I'm listed there as a individual coach, and my practice, I have an independent practice that involves one-on-one coaching for professional development for physicians and other health professionals. And that's something that I do quite frequently. It's probably the bulk of my business is what I do. In addition to that, I support medical teams in trying to do team development so that medical teams, for example, inpatient teams, palliative care teams, inpatient medicine teams, or outpatient clinic teams, to try to work more efficiently at discovering each other's gifts and talents and using them to their greatest potential. Um, But the thing that I am involved with the most with Physicians Anonymous is co-facilitating a weekly physician support group. And
Mhm.
this is for Dr. Amy King, who's a psychologist who co-facilitates my weekly meeting with me.
So you're
Um,
both on it together every week?
Correct. We're
Okay.
there together every Wednesday. I say Wednesday morning at 7:45 Pacific time because I live
Mhm.
in Seattle, Washington, and Dr. Amy lives in Oregon. So that's 7:45 every Wednesday morning. We are facilitating a group that lasts for 1 hour. And
Mhm.
this group is primarily for those physicians, residents in training, medical students who are struggling in some way, struggling with burnout, struggling with mental health issues, struggling with addiction. And they're looking for a group of people who have had similar experiences that they can relate to in a safe and if they want, completely anonymous environment. We use a Zoom platform. You can use a pseudonym, so you can
Mhm.
use an alias name. You can keep your tile, your screen off if you want the entire time. But I have found that once we are able, I mean, Dr. Amy is a psychologist, and she's very, very well trained and skilled and experienced. And I am a physician and physician coach being trained in
Mhm.
both group facilitation and individual coaching. We're able to provide a container where people, for the most part, are able to share and trust and be
Mhm.
courageous enough to share their
Mhm.
stories. And this provides support. It's done in a very supportive and structured environment, and people get to reflect on an excerpt, a poem, or something that we use to kind of stimulate conversation.
Hmm.
But people can bring up any issues that they're wrestling with and dealing with. And so we do have people that tune in every week. Different people can drop in if they'd like, and ours is one of three throughout the
Mhm.
week that are available.
And I think one is on a Sunday night, right? If the weekdays were difficult.
Correct. There's one, if I'm looking at it from
Sure.
Pacific time,
Right.
because that's my
Exactly. Right. And I'm
perspective.
in Connecticut, so yeah.
Yeah, you're connected from Eastern time, but for
Right.
the Pacific time, it is Tuesday afternoons, Wednesday mornings, and Sunday evenings.
Okay. So yeah, hopefully there would be one that fits in
Yeah.
that a doctor if they wanted to check it out. So out of curiosity, doctors might wonder, well, do people show their faces in their real names like we're doing today? Would you say in general, like or like the first time they come on, do they maybe keep it black with a pseudonym? Yeah, how does it generally work?
Yeah, I would say you're exactly right. Many physicians, depending on what their issues are, physicians, we in general, I would say, much to our detriment, are very hesitant to reach out for help.
Right.
And some of the reasons that that's true is because traditionally there have been questions on applications for state licensing as
Right.
well as admitting privileges to hospitals that refer to mental health as well as substance abuse or addiction. And those questions, for the most part, are worded in a way that say, do you believe that you have some mental illness or addiction which somehow interferes with your ability to practice
Mhm.
medicine? And many of these questions have really frightened physicians
Right.
from seeking out any treatment for
Mhm.
fear of having it on their records. As it turns out, the state licensing boards are now eliminating those questions from
Ah,
those applications. They're trying to focus specifically on those impaired physicians that may be struggling and having difficulty, who need help. But I would say, for the most part, most of the people who participate in our groups are doing it with their cameras on and with
okay.
their real names.
Right.
Because what happens is, once we realize that we are all, and I always say we because I'm struggling with my own issues,
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
we are all struggling with very similar things,
Right,
and we're dealing with them in different ways.
right.
And this is one method of being able to share our stories and connect in community with people who have gone through similar experiences.
Right, and that it is a safe place. I would very much so trust that it's a safe place and everyone knows to keep the confidences, and what stays in the meeting doesn't leave the meeting.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things we always have group norms, which are our pillars. And two of the most important ones are strict confidentiality, that anything that is shared and said does not leave the meeting. And the second is no advice.
Oh, right,
We as physicians are so used to telling people what we think they should do and how to do it.
right.
And so we try as best we can to use I language. In my
Mhm.
experience, this is what has happened,
Right,
not language like, all physicians experience this,
right.
because we can really step on toes if we do that.
Right.
In addition to that, we try not to give advice unless
Mhm.
somebody says, I am really hurting. I need some resources to get help in this area.
Mhm.
Please let me know what you suggest. That does happen occasionally. But in general, we try not to tell people what they really should be doing.
Right, right, exactly. And I think too, once they do feel comfortable having their real face and their real name, because I read it might have been Dr. Michael Hurst. It says, once that that's all everybody wants is to be like seen and heard and understood. And if you can actually like show your face and your name and say, look, I'm here and I'm struggling with this, and then to be accepted, right? And to see the support, it just relieves some of, right, if you're feeling shame or, I mean, you could probably speak to it better than me, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We all go through a certain training that is a culture that is, kind of like, stick it up, you can do it,
Mhm.
you can put up with anything, you can do it alone, you don't need any help, get out there and figure it all out, because you are supposed to be these powerful almighty physicians. And the reality is, we're human beings. We're
Right,
not perfect. We
right.
don't have it all together.
Mhm,
And we struggle as human beings just like everyone else does.
mhm,
Um, there's a lot more pressure on physicians to come up with the right answer. There's a lot more pressure on physicians now to do a lot of things that we never did in the past.
mhm.
And so as a result, I believe we all need help.
Right,
Personally,
right.
I believe, and I've told the founder of Physicians Anonymous, who uses a pseudonym
Mhm.
himself,
Yeah,
Dominic Corrigan,
yeah.
I have said, I believe those questions on the state licensing exams should say,
Mhm,
have you sought treatment or support for mental health issues? If
mhm.
not, why not?
Yeah, right, exactly. Because
Because I
everybody, right,
think the
you need
physicians who
people.
haven't sought support are the ones that I worry about.
Right, right. Yeah, that's 100% true. If people were curious about how many people show up on one of these meetings, about how many would it be?
It varies. It varies, and it depends on the momentum that we've tried to do. I have been doing it now for 1 year, so every week for a year so far. And I would say that sometimes we have one person, and sometimes we have as many as five, six, seven people. So it's not a huge number. So
Uh-huh.
everyone is able to share equally, and
Mm-hmm.
that's another thing. We try to be aware of giving everyone equal time.
And that's nice. And it's nice that it is a somewhat smaller group in general. Because I belong to this end up talking about a lot on these, but it's just wonderful. It's like a women's fellowship group in my church on Saturdays. And we have a confidentiality thing right between us and stuff like that. And we've had as many as a dozen women there, and we might average about half a dozen. And I had said once that even though I would trust any of those women, and it's not the same women that come, right? So say you had a revolving door of any mix and match, like I would trust any six of them to hear what I'm going to say if I'm going to share something. But if you have a dozen there, for some reason it feels like a little bit different, and it's harder to say something when a dozen people are there than six.
Sure. Yeah. And I think all of us are trying to be very careful about confidentiality and revealing our true experiences and the things that we struggle with. And I have found for myself that the more that I am able to find trusting environments and containers to share these types of stories, and I do feel heard, and
Hmm.
what I say resonates with other people in the group, then that
Right,
makes me feel like, oh, okay, I do belong here. I'm not
right.
alone in the world. And there is compassion that I can give to myself as well as others.
Right, right, exactly. And also, when you were speaking to not trying not to offer advice, if there's physicians out there who have never tried like any kind of coaching or therapy, if you want to speak, because obviously there's some overlap a little bit, right? But there's a difference there. If you wanted to speak a little to like, coaching versus therapy, or as far as the giving advice part, because they might think, well, if you're not going to give me advice, why am I going to show up? So just to answer
Right,
to that a little bit.
exactly. Yeah. So I myself personally, I have to say that I have been in both therapy as well as coaching, as well as spiritual advising. And I'm one of these kind of like reach out for help as much as I can get.
Hmm.
And so I've been in all of those things really since early in my practice, when I started practicing medicine. And I would say, and my wife is a clinical psychologist, so she's a therapist, and we both kind of see similar clients, but she's doing things a little differently. Therapy is really a process where people want to explore very deeply some of those issues that may be related to their past,
Hmm.
that they're struggling with, and that they want more clarity, and they want to try to work with someone in very specific techniques in order to try to gain insight and resolution to those issues and those problems that they're struggling with. Anxiety, depression,
Mhm.
trauma, those things that people can be very skilled at helping them with. Coaching, and then there's mentorship. Mentorship is someone who has walked your walk and is along ahead of you in the road, and they are people that want to give specific advice to try to help you
Mhm.
advance in your career in a similar
Mhm.
fashion. A
Mhm.
coach is someone who walks alongside of you. A coach is someone who helps mirror and reflect your own wisdom, your own creativity, and your own insight, and uses tools, practices, skills to help extract that from you, to
Mhm.
make it a little bit more intentional, and to try to understand how your wisdom and your experience can be used to move forward in a
Mhm.
direction that will accomplish what you want out of your personal and professional life. And I think that's the difference. So
Mhm.
as a coach, when I start working with a client individually, I don't know where we're going to end up. I
Right.
engage in
Right.
this kind of in a 6 month, 3 month engagement. And in the beginning, that client may tell me, I don't know if I should be in medicine or not. I'm not
Mhm.
sure. And
Mhm.
I need help in trying to
Uh-huh.
understand that.
Right.
And when I start with that client, I have no idea
Because you're
whether
not
they should
trying to
remain
get
in
them to
medicine or
do
not.
something or get them to head
Exactly.
in a certain direction, right? You're seeing what
Exactly.
they can see themselves, yeah, find for out for
Yeah.
themselves, right?
Yeah,
And
and being a doctor and being trained in a culture where I'm supposed to have all the answers,
mhm.
one of the things in transitioning from being a physician to being a coach, I've had to
Mhm.
let go of a lot of that
Mhm.
and try to keep that open mind and to really understand that everyone's walking their own path. And one person's path who I'm working with may be completely different from mine. So I have to be
Mhm.
careful about that.
Right. Well, I think it's interesting because it is an entirely different skill set, right? Being a physician and being a coach.
It is. It is in some ways, yeah, I have to be careful because my experience as a physician is going to take me into that advice
Uh-huh.
giving path. So
Right.
I have to
Right.
catch myself.
Right. Huh. And it's also interesting. that even coaches and the best coaches need a coach, because it's something that it's very difficult to do for yourself. If you wanted to speak to that for a minute, because you think, hey, if I have all this experience, and I'm sure you're an amazing coach, but you have a coach, you still have a coach yourself,
Oh
right?
yeah, I have a
And
coach, a
so, like,
therapist,
explain why
spiritual
you
director.
can't,
Yeah.
like, once you know, like, all of those things, why is it still so difficult to do it for yourself?
I will say that I often tell my clients, I'm only one step ahead of you in this
Mhm.
process. I am moving still in my own life process of trying to discover more about myself, more about
Mhm.
who I am, how
Mhm.
I show up in the world with other people, trying to attune to myself and attune to the people who are right in front of me and talking to me. And so I'm on my own journey. I need my own help. I need my own support. I need to understand my own emotional regulation as I'm interacting with a client. And so we all need help and we all
Mhm.
need that type of support. And so I think it's essential for coaches, therapists, all of us to have our own support in the
Mhm.
pathway
Right,
also.
and I think it's great that we're taught every single time we talk about this, right, can open minds and doors and windows to physicians who
Absolutely.
feel siloed.
Yeah, and right now I would say after the pandemic when we were all feeling so isolated, I
Mhm.
really held out hope that we would have this great
Mhm.
transformation in healthcare and that we would truly learn how unprepared we were for that and how broken that our system is. And unfortunately, people were so traumatized that it was kind of like, well, let's just get back to where we were
Mhm.
and that'll be good enough. And I feel like we still have a long way to go to make healthcare a healthy environment
Mhm.
and a healthy process for the care providers as well as the patients receiving the care.
Right, agreed. I agree with you 100%. So I think our the listeners probably have a pretty good idea about the anonymous group coaching, because again, the website is so easy to navigate. If they clicked on, right, anonymous meetings, and then they would just have they could pick the date and time that they want to show up, and then they would get a link, and you just show up,
Exactly.
right? And
Exactly.
we've talked
Exactly.
about, I think that have a good idea, because I think I have a good idea now what it would feel like to show up in one of those meetings. So, what about the one-on-one coaching? When would somebody decide that as opposed to the meeting? And maybe speak a little more to the one on and how that works, because my understanding is then it's individual. You go ahead.
Sure. Yes. So one-on-one coaching, especially with physicians, is going to be very personalized, very specialized with your specific situation. And usually, coaching engagements are over a specific period of time. They're usually programs that involve one on one meetings. Often it's virtual through either video meetings or through telephone. Sometimes it's in person, but it also involves interaction back and forth, either by phone, by email. It involves a lot of accompaniment through those interactions and those issues that you're wrestling with most. And sometimes that has to do with just trying to find more positive experiences in your daily practice.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's finding the career path that's best for you. Sometimes it's just trying to deal with the mountains and mountains of work that come with being a physician that are added on, how to work more efficiently and not let all of that stuff get you down and make all the rest of your life just constantly preoccupied with how much work you got left to do. So all of the type of one-on-one work is very specific to your situation,
Mm-hmm.
and you have your own personal coach that's going to be working with you during that entire time.
Right, yeah, and that's terrific. So I think people probably have a decent sense. So if at first you want to just check out, an anonymous meeting to see what it's all about, right? And then you don't even have to say anything, because sometimes you learn things just right a lot from, because even though your exactas you might not be the same, there are certain themes, right, that would be overarching, or to even when you hear like how somebody processed something, and move forward, then it can help you think of how you, because you're all smart, right? Like how you could move forward. So I think you could get some takeaways from it, even if you don't say a word. But like you said, if you have specific issues, sometimes it really is helpful to just have that one-on-one support.
Absolutely. I think with the Physicians Anonymous group, I mean, the main purpose of that is to create community and connection for people to share their stories and experiences. Whereas the one-on-one coaching really has very specific goals that you have in mind that you would like to reach. And those goals may be, I want to determine whether I want to stay in this job or not. Or I
Right.
want to determine what part of my job is most fulfilling and expand that. Or I want to decide whether I want to be in medicine or not. And so
Right.
there's just a whole range of very specific goals that one-on-one coaching would be designed
Right.
much
And
better for.
coaches are trained to ask open-ended questions to help you figure out your own answers, right? Your own
Absolutely.
solutions. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, this has been a really terrific conversation. Is there any takeaways that you wanted to leave with the physicians here?
I would
Anyone
say
like
I
that?
can't leave any conversation without mentioning self-compassion. And
Okay.
the reason I say that is because I feel like we physicians put so much pressure on ourselves to do so much for other people, focus on other people, and be compassionate in being present with other people. And we neglect ourselves. And we
Mm-hmm.
neglect ourselves not only physically, but we neglect ourselves spiritually and emotionally. And I really want to put in a pitch for self compassion, being
Mm-hmm.
able to show yourself the same
Right.
degree of compassion, empathy, forgiveness that you do your patients. And
Mm-hmm.
that is the key, I believe, for all of us to start realizing we're not in this alone, we're in it
Mm-hmm.
together, and we all need support.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that. I think that is a crucial. Yeah, 100%. So, how could our listeners get in touch with you?
Sure. You can reach me. You can get all the information from my website, and it has a listing of all my services as well as how you can schedule an appointment directly from the website for a free consultation and talk about what coaching can do for you and whether or not we would make a good match as
Mm-hmm.
far as that coaching is concerned.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I find that we wouldn't make a good match, but I know
Mm-hmm.
a whole bunch of other coaches that may be a better match for you.
Right. Yeah.
In addition, you can reach me just through email, joe@joeshermanmd.com. The website is joeshermanmd.com. Very simple.
Okay. Well, that's good to keep it simple. So one more time, thank you so much for being my guest today, Joe. I loved our conversation, and I'm excited that we finally got to have a conversation other than through the typed words.
Exactly. It was great to see you, Kim, and I hope that your work continues to move on strongly.
Okay, well, thank you. I hope so too. So, in closing, to move the needle in healthcare, we all need to raise our voices and we all need to care about each other. We already know that doctors need to care about patients, patients need to care about doctors too. So, stand up, doctors, and let's stand up for doctors.
Thanks so much, Kim.
Thanks, Joe.